The Prime Minister was accused by the Labour leader Keir Starmer of failing to get a grip on COVID-19 deaths in care homes. The Prime Minister acknowledged there was a crisis in care homes, but the government, he said, was turning things round.
He's quite right, of course, to look at the crisis in care homes, and he's absolutely right to say that there's an epidemic going on in care homes, which is something I bitterly regret. And I can tell him, actually, that he's not right in what he just said about the state of the epidemic in care homes. As he looks at the figures, in the last few days, there has been a palpable improvement.
Those figures not yet published, and probably underestimating the number of COVID-19 deaths because so many who died in care homes weren't tested. The Commons, nothing like its normal self for the first encounter between the Prime Minister and the new Labour leader, who challenged on the overall UK death rate from COVID-19.
At this stage, I don't think that international comparisons and the data is yet there to draw the conclusions that we want.
Keir Starmer.
Mr. Speaker, the argument that international comparisons can't really be made when the government's been using slides like this for weeks to do international comparison just really doesn't hold water.
The man leading the country with the worst COVID-19 death toll in Europe. Not that the government is willing to admit the grim milestone.
Topping the European death tolls made world news, despite the government here disputing the tables.
The UK now has the highest number of coronavirus deaths in Europe, according to the latest government figures.
This is a message from the government. Coronavirus is a national emergency.
Stark messages in train stations aren't going away. The government is urging much more infrastructure and construction working to restart, and the Prime Minister is planning to relax some rules over enjoying the fresh air when he speaks in a TV address on Sunday night. Changes to the furlough scheme supporting the wages of laid-off workers won't be ready for this weekend. The Treasury is hoping it can scale back the scheme to nudge some sectors, like manufacturing, back into socially distanced workplaces, but knows some other sectors are looking at a much tougher future.
There is no going back to a pre-coronavirus world for some chunks of our economy, at least for a few years. And the fact that that is happening is going to be difficult for individuals, but it's also going to be difficult for policymakers.
The furlough scheme carries on perhaps a bit longer for some sectors, but then has to switch to a new type of aid.
We will need to see a differentiation of policy where we see longer support from the furlough scheme for some sectors than others. That is difficult, but it's going to be really important that we're able to do that. And then we are going to have to think about wider support, helping people move into jobs, not just protecting them in their existing jobs, and thinking about, are there particular places, particularly tourist hotspots, that have been particularly hit, and actually where things are going to be more difficult for a longer period of time.
Overnight headlines announced COVID-19 expert Professor Neil Ferguson's breach of social isolation rules. Might that encourage rule-breaking by others?
Some people would go, who do they think they are? They can do that. Well, then I'm just going to do that as well.
We are seeing more and more people out and about already, and I think this kind of just not fueled onto the fire, but, you know, if they're seeing that he's maybe relaxing himself a little bit, others will do the same.
Well, I'd stick to the lockdown because it's too serious, the illness.
The Prime Minister is hoping to announce on Sunday that he's lifting restrictions like only one form of exercise a day. The stay-home message may be adjusted, but lockdown will still be with us more than 6 weeks after it started.